So I'm going to let you in on a little bit of a secret. I read a lot of books, as you could probably tell, but I don't really consider myself well-read. What I mean by that is I'm not really sure yet of what my rating system is necessarily. I don't find myself gravitating towards books that a lot of people recommend on BookTube and Bookstagram. And so the books that people do recommend, I typically pick up, at least the super popular ones, I tend to pick up, and I just don't really connect with the books. I don't know if that's because they're overrated or if I just am not well read enough to understand why people love these books so much. Maybe I'm just such a pea-brain that I don't get it. But these are 4 books that are pretty highly recommended on the BookTube and Bookstagram spaces, but I just don't really get it. I mean, I don't understand why they're so hyped. It could just be me. It probably is. This is just my opinion. But these are 4 books that possibly are overhyped in my eyes. The first one being Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Now, this is obviously a really, really popular sci-fi series. This is book 1 of the Southern Reach trilogy, which I think is actually more than 3 books. So I don't know why it's called the trilogy. I watched the movie before the book, and I gotta say, this is one of those rare instances where I think the movie was done a little bit better than the book. Even though the movie was very, very loosely based on this, I don't really think that the movie based its source material on this very closely. However, I thought that the movie just did a better job in terms of driving the plot forward and having certain elements, although there was that one scene that was kind of irrelevant. Anyways, I just didn't really understand most of what was going on in this book. And I know that this book is sort of more speculative, and it is supposed to be a little bit confusing because you're dealing with an alien shimmer or whatever, this Area X. This book itself, I thought I'm gonna give it another shot because maybe it's just me and I just didn't understand it. And so it is a very short novel, and I flew through it, and maybe that's why I didn't really understand it as well as I could have. So I'm definitely going to pick this book up again. It's on my physical TBR to reread. But for now, I'm putting it in the more overrated pile of books. And I just really don't get it. Next up is everyone's favorite physics textbook, and that is The Three-Body Problem. Now look, I fell asleep in almost every physics lecture that I took from high school all the way to college, and so it's no surprise that I think that this book is a little bit overrated in terms of why people love it so much. I mean, it became a Netflix show, as you can see from this unremovable sticker, which is super annoying. And the science in this book is very believable. I think that Cixin Liu did such a good job in making it a almost realistic story with fantasy elements. If you don't know what this story centers around, it's basically the theory of if first contact with aliens doesn't go according to plan, they aren't, these benign creatures, but they want to take over our planet. So it's a very speculative, scary sort of story in terms of what happens if a more advanced race discovers Earth and decides we don't want these people on the Earth. We want to take over and basically claim it as our own, right? So it's really a good story in terms of that piece, but the character work in this book is very lackluster. You don't really get much character development. You don't really understand, except for one character who goes through the Chinese Revolution, you don't really understand the motivations for most of these people that show up in the book. A lot of random characters pop up and then don't show up again ever. And so because of that reason, the story doesn't flow as well as I think it could have. Now, that's a pretty common complaint with this book, but for me, it just didn't really work because it was almost too sciencey. It was almost like I said, it's almost like a true physics book wrapped up in a fictional story. And it just wasn't my favorite. I understand that, this is for the more sciencey nerds out there, and I totally respect that. I'm going to try to finish this series eventually. Who knows if I ever will, but I'm going to try to finish this series because I am fascinated to see if it all sort of ties up in the end. I have heard that I think Death's End is the last book in this series. Don't quote me on that, but I think Death's End is known to be a great conclusion to this series, and so I definitely want to figure that out. It's just not that high on my priority list right now. I'm gonna be honest. This one, I potentially am too pea-brained to understand that. I'm totally fine with that. It just is a little bit overrated for me. Next, this one is going to ruffle a few feathers because it is a darling. of BookTube and Bookstagram. Don't come at me too hard in the comments. My small pea brain cannot take it, but this is Pure Nessie by Susanna Clarke. Now, I understand, right? It's very atmospheric. The prose is beautiful. The setting is beautiful. The way that Susanna Clarke writes is some of the most beautiful prose that I've ever seen. She really transports you into this labyrinth of corridors and vestibules and statues. And the first 50 to 75 pages really reads like someone is taking you through a tour of, you know, the greatest art museum to ever have existed, like the Met in New York. And someone is taking you through every single hall, every single statue. They're showing you all the fantastic art pieces around. That's what this book is written like, right? And I thought that it really transports you into a new world, right? It's very atmospheric, like I said. It's very cozy in a sense. The only reason why I didn't really understand this book specifically is because, well, the plot wasn't really there. Maybe it's just that I missed it. Maybe I was just trying to read so quickly that I just didn't understand what Susanna Clarke was getting at with this book specifically. And that could be on me. I totally acknowledge that. My brain is kind of small and I need to sort of expand my, I don't know, atmospheric reading skills. But for me, this book, it just wasn't for me. Right. I'm going to try to reread this book too, to see if I missed anything. I have actually tried to reread this book and same issue. Like, I just felt like, what's the point of this book? But again, not a bad book by any means. I did enjoy my reading experience with this book. I just finished it and tossed it aside and never really thought about it again until I kept seeing it on BookTube and Bookstagram. So that's Pure Nessie by Susanna Clarke. And the fourth and final book that proves that I have a pea brain is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Now, I love Ishiguro's writing. I've read Never Let Me Go. I have The Remains of the Day on my TBR. I'm halfway through The Buried Giant, which is another book that he's written. And Clara and the Sun was actually my first encounter with Ishiguro. And I never thought that I would pick up an Ishiguro again because of this book. So this book follows Clara, who's an artificial friend to a sickly girl named Josie, and it follows their relationship as it grows, as Josie grows, and along the way you find out some things about Josie's family and things of that nature. So you're just following this relationship. Now, the reason why I think that this book is a little bit not my cup of tea is because there's a plot twist in the middle of it. And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the plot twist itself, it just kind of fizzles out. And the book ends without the plot twist ever having any meaning to the story. And so I just didn't really enjoy that piece of it, right? Because in Never Let Me Go, you have this plot twist that plays out until the end, right? You get a piece of information about the story and it kind of plays out and it has implications until the end of the story. In Clara and the Sun, you find out a piece of information that is devastating and it just kind of fizzles out. Goes from a very almost dystopian kind of book to a more hopeful book. Call me messed up in the head, but I wanted more of that dystopian kind of book because Clara and the Sun is Clara herself is a very bright character. And I was just expecting a little bit more development in that area. Maybe that she would, grow to understand the more dark parts of society. However, it just kind of fizzles out, like I said. And so that's one of the main reasons why I didn't relate to this book as much as something like Never Let Me Go. So those are 4 books that I think demonstrate how small my brain is. I think that, obviously a lot of people love these books. A lot of people recommend these books. And I myself, to a specific kind of reader, would recommend most of these books to you. However, for me, and I know that a lot of these also lean more into the science fiction over the fantasy elements. And I do consider myself a science fiction fan, but maybe I just need to work my way into the genre a little bit slower. Maybe with something like Hyperion or an Ender's Game, which I have read. But for now, I'll just accept the fact that I'm a little bit pea-brain. I do think that some of these are a little bit overhyped. However, that's just my opinion. Let me know if you have any books that you think are overhyped. Let me know if, you're also a fellow pea-brain and let's chat. I'm always happy to chat with other pea-brains. Anyways, love you guys. Peace.